from an operational standpoint, can you say who you worked with on the American side?
It's Dev Crew guys. Yeah.
Would it normally be a situation where like they're doing the hit and you're a blocking force, or vice versa, or was it higher level than that?
It depended on what the mission was, but we also to elaborate as well. We used to always have a Dev Crew guy attached to us, and we would have one attached to the Dev Crew. We had the same with the Australian SAS, so we did a lot of cross training as well. So and that's why, for certain scenarios where the units came together, we understood each other's TTPs. It made it a bit easier rather than going with these other guys and they don't understand. You know, we take things from the Americans and they may steal a couple of things from us as well.
Yeah. Are there any details operationally that don't give away TTPs or locations that you can share about anything that you've done?
It's a good story actually. It was a hostage rescue in Somalia, and our pager went off. It literally wasn't long after the whole Captain Phillips incident, and we're on the black roll, and I remember going to work in the morning, and in the offices there's a lot of people walking around, and I'm like, what's going on? And like, I don't know, you can sense something's happening. And basically this elderly couple everyone had been warned, not to go to mainland Africa. They basically ignored that and sailed from Seychelles and going down to Tanzania and got picked up by pirates. So I remember going in the gym in the afternoon and the pager went off. So that perfect. Pager's gone off, got our kit, went to RAF Brize Norton, loaded onto a C-17, which was actually bound for Iraq. And Afghanistan, and then it got diverted. We took that to Oman. So in Oman, we do our pre-deployment training. We have a great training facility there, and you can do the mobility, you can do the air and everything else, and very similar to the Afghan and the Iraq environment. And so we have a AC-130 there for the jumps, and so we're flying out to that. And then we've got the mission pack about this couple. This elderly couple. But one of the things that stood out for me, for us to do hostage rescue, we have to have a MERT team, which is basically these doctors, these surgeons. And these guys came to us and they're like, oh, we've never jumped static line squares. Yeah. And we're like, they've done their rounds. Yeah. And they're like, okay. So we ended up having to teach them mid-flight how to jump, how they'd be jumping out.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
And we go to Oman, we pick up the AC-130 and we all cross deck and then flying out over the Indian Ocean. And we had 2 sticks, there were 16 guys, and then he obviously had the 4 MERT guys. So stick 1 went out with the first 2 MERT guys. I was a team leader of stick 2, and I was the dive rep for the squadron because of my background. They're like, well, you're the dive rep. And so I had a big Avon bag with all these we had 4 rebreathers just in case we needed to use them. And so these 2 PGIs picked me up and they just put me to this tailgate. And I remember just looking out over the Indian Ocean. Normally, if we had a bit of time, we'd have our own ribs, and our coxswains would jump out with us because we can throw 2 24-foot ribs out the back of a Herc and go after it. But we didn't have, because of the timelines was critical, we didn't have that. So there was already a Royal Navy vessel in the Indian Ocean and they had their own coxswains who'd done ribs, but they'd never picked up parachutists before. So for us, when you're flying through the air, you want to get as close to that rib as possible and get in. So I'm jumping out at night and I'm flying, trying to fly towards these ribs, and they kept moving away because we were all worried because we weren't worried about anything, but it was the fact there was sharks off the coast of Somalia. So we wanted to get out, but we got picked up by these boats, boarded the vessel and headed, and then we loaded up again, and then we were steaming towards the target area. And this was our Iranian embassy for the SBS. This is what we were going to be doing. And I remember they were actually cross-decking them onto a mothership, and we must have been on about 1 nautic out. Now, they couldn't see us, but we could see them. And then all we got over the net was stop. I'm like, what? Ended up getting pulled back. Didn't really know the full picture, got boarded the vessel, but it turned out that the president of Somalia was in London with our Prime Minister, Gordon Brown. So for them, what they didn't want the next day is 30 dead pirates on the thing. So that ended up been a backlash for them because it got leaked to the press that we were there and we could have done the rescue. And then the pager went off again the following week and it turned out to be the same people. Anyway, long story, but during this period, there was a young boy in Somalia. This is a great ending. And he came home upset, been bullied in school, and his dad like, what's wrong? And he's, a lot of kids have been bullying him because he's from Somalia and there'd been a lot of hostage stuff. But his father was from this tribe that were actually holding this couple.
Oh, wow.
And unbeknown to a lot of people, about 18 months, over 18 months before they got released. UK are very adamant they won't pay for a hostage release. But the guy went over with a couple of £1 million from the Somali community in London and paid for them to release themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man,
so
that's wild.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So for us, it's like, in reflection, I think it was a wrong decision, regardless of, they're worried about public perception. That's what it was. And obviously keeping those relationships with Somalia. But for us, it was like, everything flowed. We were good to go. It was our Iranian embassy.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So you did two black roll rotations. And you did multiple trips to Afghanistan. Did you do any to Iraq?
No. SAS were doing the Iraq.
That's
ones,
right.
Yeah.
Did you do anything like here in the United States? We'll call it stateside work. What would you call it in Britain?
Back in UK?
Yeah. If you did something in the UK operationally, it would be considered done.
Okay,
at home, or like how would you reference it?
Yeah, so on our black rolls, we would be training a lot in the UK. We used to do a lot of cross training with the police. The guys would be attached to them, but yeah.
But what would you call doing? Like I said, here we would call it stateside work.
Yeah.
What would you call it there?
Nothing. No, yeah.
Just say here at home.
Yeah. Just here at home, because for us, our remit was UK and abroad as well. Yeah. So
did you do any real world operations inside the UK?
Only training. No, thankfully, I didn't need to do anything. Yeah.
Has your unit or have any of your guys done real world operations in the UK?
Yeah, there's been some incidents. There's been vessels taken down off the coast of UK. There was there's a few stuff at the Glasgow airport. There was a few things. Yeah.
And then the rest of the time, it's all training or standby or.
Training or standby, like I say, you go away, do all these courses, which is great. But then when you come around after that 2-year rule mark, you're probably out of date and you have to then get requalified. It was very difficult for you to even spend some time back at camp. I remember one year, 1 week. Sorry, I was on a Friday and I'd just come back from somewhere and I was like, perfect. No, I was supposed to go on a course, and the course got cancelled on the Friday. I was like, perfect, there's nothing in for next week. I've got a week at camp, I can go see the dentist, sort out some admin and things like that. By the time the end of the day, the sergeant major had me on another course. They will fill your diary. And that's what as you know, it's quite a selfish role, being a family man. You're hardly home at all. So, it's difficult. Yeah. I mean, and like you said, if you then on the black roll, sometimes you're on 30 minutes notice to move. You can't be left alone with your kids. Yeah. So even if you are home, you can't be alone with your kids as well.
Wow. That is tough. Ultimately, you ended up getting medically retired because of a bad parachuting accident.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So we're back. We're in Oman doing pre-deployment training for another Afghan tour, and we'd had some new guys come through selection since we were last in Afghan, and so they had to get hey-ho trained. So they'd done their static line squares and we're doing hey-ho. And the sergeant major's like, well, you guys go, what do you call it? You could go do some fun jumps.
Yeah.
And I never believe, the military's great in taking a sport and ruining it, it's skiing, diving or parachuting. Yeah. So we're jumping, and it's about the third or fourth jump of the day. And normally I like to go at the front of the stick and then just frog it, just jump back and and face back into the aircraft. And one of the team leaders, all right, Stott, you're in the middle of the stick. I was like, okay. So I ended up in the middle of the stick. And as I'm jumping out, did my compulsory count. And then I'm looking, and I'm like, I'm looking the wrong way. I was looking up at my foot in the line and not looking out towards the rest of the team. And so I was frantically trying to clear my leg in time, because with the static line, you've got a few seconds and that parachute's now going to open. And I couldn't clear my leg in time. When the parachute did open, it pulled my leg back and to the right. And thankfully my heel did clear from the line and didn't come completely off. So straight away there was a pain I'd never felt before. And when you do hey-ho jump, you jump at 15,000 feet. So it's the limits of oxygen. You don't need to go on oxygen anything higher. And so the air is quite thin. And so I was vomiting because of the pain. So I've been sick all over myself. And I was also drifting in and out of consciousness. But when I was coming back to, I could see the guys. I was flying in the right direction. I mean, as I started descending, the air's getting a bit better for me. I mean, I'm just flying through the air, and I had comms with the guy, but there's no point in me telling them because there's nothing we can do mid-air. So for me, I have to land this. So my first concern was about landing it correctly, because if I'd mistimed the landing, I could damage the good leg. And so you get to the NATO T in the desert, and I could see the guys and their approach, and I came and I landed one leg. It was a great landing, and just screamed out medic. And my mate who was next to me was like, "That was a good landing." I said, "Like, the exit wasn't." And so the doc came over, told him what happened, and we went straight to the hospital. Had an MRI, and I tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus in my knee, my hamstring, my calf, and my quadricep. So all the supporting muscles as well. Because normally, I know like rugby players can tear their ACL, but they have good muscle structure to support it. But that had all gone as well. But to add to the issue, to the pain, is it was the same time as the back in 2010. It was the same time as the Icelandic volcano eruption, which had grounded majority of the aircraft. So they couldn't get an Aeromed flight to me. So I was basically put in a hotel for 4 weeks on painkillers and waited for the next flight, which is actually the critical time that you should be recovering. Got back to UK, went to the hospital. They said, right, go home for 6 weeks, come back. Came back 6 weeks later, by which time my unit lads have gone. They were in Afghan. Came back, they lost my MRI scans, and it was just a whole spiral of errors, and it just started going downhill and downhill. Yeah.
Did you get surgery?
I got surgery in the end.
Yeah.
When I talked about my first selection, when I blew my knee out, I got surgery within 72 hours of that. I mean, within 6 weeks, I was back on the training team doing 30 milers on the commander course. It took me 44 weeks to get surgery. I actually almost threatened the MOD to get it done before I left. So, I had a great time in the military, loved the military, and I've always promoted the military. But that last year wasn't, that last period or few months wasn't great for me at all.
Yeah, that sucks. So they medically retired you?
Again, I got retired, but it wasn't on what I should have been getting. And it took me 5 years, and I won a tribunal hearing against the MOD. Yeah. Stuff you shouldn't be doing, really.
No, I agree. I mean, there's so many examples, similar examples, here with the American military of shit like that. So now all of a sudden you go from your identity as one of the most elite special operations soldiers in the world, to a medically retired civilian that doesn't have anything going on. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, at the time I didn't really, my wife, I met my wife not long before getting injured, actually. She saw me at my best and then really saw me at my worst in a short period of time. She's very entrepreneurial. The military is like your mother and your father. That they'll clothe you, they feed you, they pay you on time, and they keep all those other distractions away from you so you can focus on your job. And so Alana was a bank manager at the time. And so those worries that I had about banking and where I get gas from and electric, those things she picked up. But I was going through an identity crisis. I've gone from, like you're saying, having a role and a purpose to where do I now fit in society? And to sort of add to the pressure as well, Alana was now, when I left, she was 8 months pregnant with our first child. And so I was worried, is there any work out there? Because I hadn't planned to leave. Is there going to be any work out there? How am I going to support the family? And, without sounding like Liam Neeson, with our particular skill sets, we tend to go into the security sector. But in the security sector, I did a little bit of research while I was waiting on my operation. Me and my wife, went away and I did a sea close protection course when I was in SF. But a friend of mine, he worked and he said, well, the biggest money is in corporate close protection. The security industry isn't risk reward ratio balanced. You could be in Afghan and Iraq, on 50% of the money the guys are on in 5-star hotels or on super yachts. So I was like, well, I'll follow the money. So I went and did a corporate CP course with Alana. She did surveillance courses as well. And then, when I got out, a lot, anti-piracy thing was still at its height, and a few of my friends from the SBS had their own companies. I didn't want to be competing with them. I didn't want to go Afghan in Iraq, so focus on that corporate bit. My first job within 48 hours is helping set up the British Embassy in Benghazi during the Arab Spring. So this is May 2011 now. So as soon as I got there, boots on the ground, representing this company, soon identified that the Libyans didn't want it to be another Afghanistan in Iraq. You know, Gaddafi was still alive at this point. He's in Tripoli, you know, the city surrounded. So once Gaddafi had fallen, they wanted to take control of the country. Didn't want private security companies walking around with weapons. But then I'm sat in this hotel, and there's NGOs there, there's oil and gas, and there's some of the biggest private security companies out there. I always call them the big five. And I was listening to some of their directors and managers winning these bids and then over-promising crisis management and evacuation plans, which weren't actually in place. I was like, that's not in place, you know. So I flew back from that trip. Alana gave birth to Molly, and I said, look, I've got a plan. So there's a huge proliferation of weapons at this time because it's, you know, it was still accessible before Gaddafi had fallen. So I went back in and I bought 30 weapons on the black market, and I buried them between Tunis and Egypt, and designed my own evacuation plans, put some comms kit in there, put money in there, and just left them. And just obviously spent a month just burying them in the desert. We lived in Aberdeen, which is like the oil and gas capital of Europe. It's like the Houston of Europe. So we had access, my wife's from Aberdeen, we had access to some of the oil subsidiary companies. And so I was selling this concept to them, and some of them were giving it as a retainer. Hopefully never needed to use it. But each phone call I was getting was a different task. It was a different country. And so I was learning a lot about the security industry. You know, I sort of joke when you tell people you're in the security industry and you look like the way you are, they think you're a doorman from the local nightclub. And it's like, well, no, you know, the security industry is very, very diverse. You have surveillance, close protection, coaching, mentoring, maritime, cyber. You know, it's a big old beast. And so for me, I was learning so much about the security in a short period of time. Each phone call was different. You know, one, I was training the Kurdish Special Forces to fight ISIS. The next one, I'm taking the UAE Royal Family super yacht from Barcelona to the Maldives. You know, then London Olympics, the Brazil Soccer World Cup. You know, there was all these different areas. But I just finished the London Olympics, 6 weeks in London, which was great. And I tended to find that every time I had a good task, I ended up having a bad task. And I was in Benghazi, September 11, 2012, and I see, obviously, Ty's bracelet on there. So I get a phone call, and there's a German oil company called KCA Deutag who were there. And at this point, it was on the evening, September 11th. No one knew what was going on. And they're like, Dean, can you get this oil company from Benghazi back to Tripoli? I said, yeah. So I turned up, picked up these eight German engineers. And what I did is I had a safe house in Zella. So rather than going straight from Benghazi to Tripoli, which is the coastal road, what people don't understand, in Libya, I have like 167 tribes. And so I can't take drivers from Benghazi to Tripoli. You've got to go through Misrata and Tripoli, and you know that will cause issues in itself. And so I had a safe house in Zella. We drove them out to Zella. It's about 5 miles southwest of Benghazi, safe enough out there. And we just stayed there for 36 hours, by which time we could see everything unfolding on the news. Now realize actually what had happened, because at that point we didn't know what was going on. But during that period, I had drivers coming in from Tripoli, but I couldn't tell the drivers from Benghazi because they would just leave. And I remember the morning that the drivers arrived, it was like the OK Corral. You know, the Benghazis had their pistols out, the people from Tripoli, and they were arguing. And I said, look, and I sat them down. I said, look, I cannot take you to Tripoli. That's going to be an issue, and you don't want to come either. And they're like, no. I said, so, no, these drivers are going to take us. They were worried about whether they were going to get their money. So, I paid them. Them guys went, and then we went to Tripoli. So that was a success.
How did you line up a safe house there?
So when I was doing the caches, I identified safe houses in different areas, and that's pretty much where my caches are. So the caches are next to safe houses. So again, with Libya, you've got you've got so many tribes and so many different people. So I have a number of fixers. So a fixer is someone who's a local who can get you stuff that you need. And so my fixer, for example, in Tripoli, you know, his cousin was the president of the GNC, which is the new government, and he's from the West, but I couldn't use him in Benghazi. So I had equivalents in different areas. And so they would identify safe houses for me that we could use and be able to utilize up to 72 hours. So when you're doing evacuations, if there's an issue, you have safe house options along the route.
But how are you identifying who your fixers are? Like, how are you identifying the safe house? Is it something where you're renting it for a month, or like logistically, how are you pulling that off?
Yeah, so identifying the fixers is quite difficult. There has to be an element of trust. You know, you can't, you know, for me with some of these countries that I go into, I literally go on, I sometimes work on my own and I just work on personal skills. And so you have to put an element of trust into these people. And for them, actually, believe it or not, the safe houses are just normal people's houses. So they didn't really want retainers. They just wanted to know, you know, we'll talk about some of the other evacuations. Everyone's quite quick to tarnish certain communities with one brush because certain incidents, for example, like 9/11 with the Muslim community. But a lot of the most hospitable people I've seen, they don't like terrorists, you know, and so they just want to help you. So there's a couple of countries where I've had to pay retainers, just because strategically they're places that we want, but most of them were just doing it pro bono.
And if you are doing a retainer, what kind of money is that?
You know, for them, I'm getting retainers from the oil company. So, you know, it could be like $1,000 a month, which is huge for them. Yeah. Okay. But that's also to make sure that there's food and water in place and,
right.
and things like that. And then we have drivers as well.
Wow. All right. So you get them out, no problem, no issues along the way. No
issues along the way. Like I said, you know, I think, you know, other companies may have just taken that coastal road and panicked. And so for us, it was a bit longer, but it was the right decision. You know, I always joke that when people speak about special forces, you know, Hollywood doesn't help matters. You know, Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham. It's all about the offensive action. I call it the biceps, the bullets, and the bombs. Yeah. But that's 25% of what we do in SF. But 50% of what we do is hearts and minds, support and influence. And so that's what I've really targeted on here is understanding the demographics, the politics, and the tribal influences of the countries that I go into. And so when I go in initially, you know, I sit down, meet fixers and really get them to explain to me the history of the country, the issues when it comes to tribals and stuff like that, and get a real understanding of the country myself and understanding the atmospherics. I remember going to Somalia once and flew in on my own, and I ended up meeting this gentleman. So everyone was at the airbase, and I just walked out the airport, went to the nearest hotel. It was called the Peace Hotel, and ended up meeting a gentleman who we ended up doing business with, and he's actually from London. But I sat down with him and his family, and he said, "Look, I get emails all the time from security companies all around the world wanting to do business, but you've come here, you've taken the risk, you understand." You know, I call it the media monster. The media monster doesn't help the matter with some of these places. But understand that, yes, they're not naive to think there's not places of risk. It's like anywhere, but it's not as bad as the world's making out. So that's what I do. I sort of build those relationships and try and learn as much about the country as possible. And that helps me with my planning as well.
Yeah. Man, that's fascinating. That's a lot going on to organize yourself. You also did the evacuation of a Canadian embassy where you rescued 4 diplomats and 18 military personnel. Can you talk about that?
So that was 2 years later. So I'm now, again, at another sporting event. I'm in Brazil covering the Soccer World Cup.
Covering it how?
So the client we were working for was Visa. Visa, one of the main sponsors. So they would have some of their board members coming in, and you know, again, it's the 5-star hotels, it's the tickets for all the events, and literally these big sporting events, they have security, they have the police in place as well. But should there be an issue, they almost need a go-to to look for. So we would actually, a lot of them didn't even realize we were security. We would just be blended in with them and sat with them. But should there be an incident, that we can then direct them and take them.
Are you carrying weapons or no?
No, we're not carrying weapons on that. You know, we also, in Brazil, we had ex-military and law enforcement with us, and they were carrying. Yeah. Okay. But I think between the 6 weeks in London and the 3 weeks I ended up doing in Brazil, I ended up just giving out two paracetamol. That was it. That was the extent of what I was needed. But you're almost there as a layer should there be an issue, which is it's a great gig.
Yeah.
So whilst this was going on, we had the Tripoli War in Libya, which was a civil war between the militias and the government. And so with the Canadian embassy, all the other embassies had shut down their shutters and just went to the border as soon as they realized there was an issue. The year prior, the Canadian embassy did a review, and they soon realized that it's costing them $20 million a year to be in Libya. All these embassies are there for like trade and investment, looking at opportunities for Canada, opportunities for US, for the UK. And they realize it's going to be another 15 years before Libya sorts themselves out. So they're like, well,
fuck this.
We're off. But they couldn't just shut shop and go right in the middle of peacetime because the questions would be asked. So they needed a window of opportunity to do it. So whereas the other embassies shut shop and disappeared, they stayed because they had to shred down, collapse their offices and everything else. They had their own CP team who was made up of some Canadian military and reservists. And with these guys, they would rotate every 4 months. They would fly in and out of Tripoli International Airport and then do that. They used to stay in a place called Palm City, which is all their accommodation, where a few of the oil and gas people, it's like a resort on the Tripoli coastline. There's a lot of oil and gas there, a lot of the embassies. And then their offices are in the city. So really, they only ever worked within the city walls. They'd never, I don't want to throw them on the bus. None of them had foresight to actually do any recce's out of the city. Yeah. And so I then get a phone call saying, all the other embassies are gone, there's securities companies are gone, no one's coming back, your name keeps coming up. So I flew back in, I flew into Libya, met them at to Palm City, and I sat down with their CP team, because I'd done the coastal route so many times. It's actually only 100 kilometers from Tripoli to the Tunis border. And Zawara, which is on the border, is where my fixer was from. So he knew everyone along that way. So the Canadians were happy that I would help them, escort them and guide them out of the country. The issue they had, or concern they had, is the week before the British embassy got shot at every checkpoint between Tripoli and Tunis. But the reason for that, so again, another issue that the security issue, all the embassy vehicles in Libya had red number plates, which indicated it was embassy. And then they had like a certain number in the corner which dictated which embassy it was from. But the Brits just decided to drive through the checkpoints and not stop. They sort of panicked. So the locals were just shooting them, which obviously concerned by the time that information got back to Canadians, they're now panicking. Yeah. So myself and my fixer, we went out to the checkpoints. And rather than speaking to the guys who were at the checkpoint with the guns, we spoke to the tribal elders. We sat down with them, had coffee, had lunch, and actually it was all about showing them respect, communication, being fully transparent. This is who we are, this is what we're doing, this is the time we intend to do it. Yeah, we palm their hands with a few $100s, which is fine. So then when we were coming into those areas, they would come in and escort us through. Oh, wow. Yeah, so really, it sounds very sexy in Hollywood. It wasn't. It was just really... Just logistics. Yeah. And so their convoy... The Canadians, their CP guy, Chad, was in their lead vehicle. And then me and my fixer were in another vehicle. The issue they had with their vehicles, they could only put so much equipment in it. And so they had a lot of other specialist equipment they couldn't get. So what we did is I hired 2 fish wagons. So the fish wagons used to take fish each day from Tripoli to Tunis. So they're always going through that border. So that the border guys know who they are. And we actually just loaded it with a military kit and they just went straight through, no issue, yeah. And so all I would do is, I would be probably a couple of miles ahead of their convoy, get to the checkpoints and then just obviously speak to the guys and then just call them through. So yeah, it was literally just bouncing them through to the end.
Yeah, that's wild. I do have a Patreon question from Hunter Baxter. I want to know what's running through your mind while evacuating people in Libya.
Yeah, so for me, I try not to. Best things to have a plan in place. But the success of what we do is being reactive to situation changes. Actually that plan went quite well. The issue we had was the morning that we decided we were going to do it. We were supposed to leave at like first light, and we ended up leaving about 2 or 3 hours later because I didn't realize that the alcohol that belongs to the embassy belongs to the Queen. And so we had to find someone to sign that over to.
Jeez.
So I'm like, oh my God,
That's what you're worried about?
Yeah, so that's what you're worried about. So, there's little things like that which catch you out by surprise. So we ended up, delaying our move. And I remember I remember being ahead, and I was just outside Zawara waiting on the convoy coming, and they were slow. I'm like, what's going on? And I had comms with Chad. He's like, oh yeah, we're held up. But one of the senior NCOs decided he wanted to drive the vehicle and ended up having a road traffic collision with one of the locals.
Oh, wow.
But what they did is the Canadians, they panicked and came running to the border. So by the time they came to me just at the border, I then had them to get through, and then I had this disgruntled Libyan as well. So yeah, just dealing with those sort of things. Things that are out of your control. You know, when you're planning these things, you go through all the potential actions on and what you would do. But there's things I couldn't factor alcohol for the Queen or a road traffic collision.
No doubt.